Thank you very much. Greetings to all viewers of BBS television. Good morning to you all. And you're welcome to this program, Somera muddiirolyo. Ensobo ekyusa amaaso nga naawe envubu okyusa. Mu classroom tuvuddeyo tuli mu kusomera muddiiro lyaffe. Kati program Somera muddiirolyo. We have closed school when we were in the 7th week, and most of the members of the teachers in your schools had covered at least the first 3 topics, or at least the first 2. That is location of Africa, physical features of Africa, climate of Africa, and vegetation of Africa. We believe that your teachers had covered at least the first 2 or 3 topics, and we assume that majority had at least covered the first 3, and therefore we shall begin by looking at vegetation of Africa. Vegetation to a P7 candidate who is watching this program, Somera muddiirolyo, is not a new topic. We cover it in P3, in P4, P5, up to P7. And we learned that whenever we talk about vegetation, so we are looking at the topic vegetation of Africa. We learned that whenever we talk about vegetation, we are referring to the plant life, the plants. When you go out there, you'll see very many plants. All the plants you see in the environment, that's vegetation. So if anyone talks about vegetation, just to know we are talking about plant life, the plants of an area. So vegetation is the plant cover. Vegetation is the plant cover of an area. So when someone talks about vegetation, don't think about anything else. Think about plants. When you look around, there are some plants which are planted by people. All the plants that are planted by people, we call them planted vegetation. So basically, we have 2 types of vegetation. Some are planted by people, while others grow on their own. Those which are planted by people, we refer to them as planted vegetation. So planted vegetation are those plants that are planted by people. These plants may include examples of planted vegetation. Those plants which are planted by people. Examples may include crops. So crops are also part of vegetation. We can even give examples of these crops, like banana plants, I think every candidate who is watching this program, Somera muddiirolyo, at least knows that banana plants are planted by people. We have bean plants, mango plants, among others. You can mention them. Also, among the planted vegetation, we have planted forests. We can even as well mention those trees that are found in planted forests because they are planted by people. For example, pines, eucalyptus, cedar, you can mention them. All those plants are planted by people, and we call them planted vegetation. We also have some grass that is planted by people. So whenever you see those plants in the environment which are planted by people, you just know we are talking about what you're seeing is planted vegetation, and that is one type of vegetation in our environment. So when you move around your environment, after this program, Somera muddiirolyo, please move around with your notebook and write down all those plants which are planted by people in your community. Write both the grasses, the crops, the trees, and even the flowers. You write their names under the heading, examples of planted vegetation. Then the second type of vegetation, we have what we call natural vegetation. In science, anything which is not created, or anything which is not made by a human being is natural, meaning it exists on its own. So you have those plants that grow on their own. No person planted them. They were not planted by anyone, but they are there. Such plants, we call them natural vegetation. So natural vegetation are those plants that grow on their own. Plants that grow on their own. Are you able to mention some of them? All right. We have natural forests. Examples of such vegetation: the plants that grow on their own. If you have ever seen a natural forest, which I believe all the viewers of this program, our dear candidates, when you go out, either in the bus, even in the community where you live, we have those forests that grow on their own. Those are part of the natural vegetation, natural forests. You can even mention those trees that are found, or those plants that are found in natural forests, like mahogany, muvule, rosewood. Though these days, some of these trees here are planted by people, but they are mostly and commonly found in natural forests. Many people don't want to plant them because they take a very long time to mature, so they may not be economical to them. So they are commonly found in natural forests. We also have swamps. So you have examples of swamp vegetation like papyrus. We also have grasslands. There are those places where grass grow on its own. No one plants it, but it is there. We have bushes. We can mention them. So those are the two types of vegetation we have in our environment. There are those that grow on their own, and we call them natural vegetation. So natural vegetation is the plant cover of an area which grows on its own. These are the plants that grow on their own. That's natural vegetation. When you move around after this program, Somera muddiirolyo, please move around and see which plants in your community grow on their own. And please mention them. You can even learn them. You can even learn their names in their local languages. If you don't know them in your local language, ask your parent. He will tell it to you, such that you will understand it better. Then we have those ones. We said we have those ones that are planted by people. Those which are planted by people, we call them planted vegetation. And natural vegetation is not the same in all areas. So we have different kinds of natural vegetation. You go somewhere, you find when they are mainly grasslands. You go in other places, you find when the trees which are there are very tall. You go somewhere, you find when the trees there are very short. And in some places, they are scattered. So we come up with different kinds of natural vegetation. And those different kinds of natural vegetation, we now call them vegetation zones. We call them vegetation zones. In P5, we looked at the vegetation zones of Uganda. Those are now the different kinds of vegetation that we have, the different kinds of natural vegetation in our environment. We said this include equatorial vegetation. We also have savanna vegetation. We also have montane vegetation. And we said we have semi-arid vegetation. And now we have got that. Now we are looking at the climate of Africa. Africa is bigger than Uganda. So there are very many other vegetation zones which are in Africa, but they are not there in Uganda. So we can add them to the list, such that we shall see the vegetation zones that we have in Africa. Besides equatorial, which is in Uganda, savanna, which is in Uganda, montane, it is in Uganda, semi-arid is also in Uganda. There are also those others which are not in Uganda. For example, we have Mediterranean. Have Mediterranean vegetation. There is also temperate temperate vegetation. We also have mangrove vegetation. And we are supposed to discuss each of these vegetation zones one by one, such that we shall come to understand them better. So in case you're moving either by bus or you have gone to any area, you just look at the kind of natural vegetation and you're able to tell that this is really equatorial, this is really savanna, without even asking anyone. But just from what we are discussing here in the program Somera muddiirolyo, we shall begin with equatorial. In P5, we located equatorial vegetation on the map of Uganda. We said equatorial vegetation in Uganda is mostly found around Lake Victoria. It's mostly found around Lake Victoria. We have forests like Mabila Forest in Buikwe. We have Marabigambo Forest in Rakai. Those are equatorial forests. We also have those forests of Sese in Kalangala. They're also equatorial forests. These forests, we said they grow in areas that receive heavy rainfall throughout the year, and the temperatures are high throughout the year. And now those are areas with equatorial climate. And in this case, we want to see where equatorial climate can be located on the map of Africa. We want to locate equatorial climate on the map of Africa. This is a sketch map. That's the sketch map of Africa. Equatorial vegetation is mostly and basically located in those areas near the equator, where heavy rainfall is received throughout the year, and the temperatures are high throughout the year. And those are areas between, if this is the equator, latitude 0 degrees. There are those areas around 5 degrees north to 7 degrees north. Then 5 degrees to 7 degrees south. Those are areas that are covered basically by equatorial vegetation. So it covers mostly the coast of West Africa and most parts of Central Africa. While we are looking at the topic of climate, you realize that we said this area, this region here, is covered by equatorial climate. So because the climate which is there is equatorial, heavy rainfall is received throughout the year, and the temperatures are high throughout the year. So it makes the vegetation which grows there also to be of the equatorial type. So this area here, mostly the central region of Africa, it is covered by equatorial forests. Equatorial forests, we also refer to them as tropical rainforests. We also call them tropical rainforests. also call them tropical rainforests. We call them tropical rainforests just because this area is also within the tropics. It is within the tropical region, and the vegetation which is there is mostly there. It mostly consists of the forests. So we refer to it as tropical rainforests. We look at the characteristics of that climatic zone, that vegetation zone, the equatorial vegetation zone, or tropical rainforests. Characteristics. Of tropical rainforests. We said tropical rainforests are also called equatorial forests. We gave an example of Mabira around Lake Victoria. When you go to those countries there, those countries of Central Africa and at the West African coast, you'll find there very many of those equatorial forests. One, they are evergreen. That's why in most cases we refer to it as evergreen vegetation. Do you know what makes it to be evergreen? It is because rainfall is received throughout the year. They receive rainfall throughout the year. So the rainfall received throughout the year makes that vegetation evergreen. Equatorial regions don't have any dry season. So those areas receive rainfall throughout the year. So the vegetation becomes evergreen. Also, trees are tall. Trees in equatorial forests are tall. Trees in equatorial forests are tall. Because the area receives a lot of rainfall, and these trees grow close to each other, so they compete for sunlight. Because of competition for sunlight, they become very tall. In science, you looked at phototropism, plant response towards light. So as they respond to light, they compete such that each one can be tall, can be at least above each other, such that can have more access to the sunlight. So they end up becoming very tall due to that competition for sunlight. Most plants have broad leaves. Most plants have broad leaves in equatorial forests. Their leaves are wide, they are broad. Their leaves are broad. They are not narrow. So most of them have broad leaves. Trees have buttress roots. So the roots don't go so deep. They are buttress roots. They don't have those deep tap roots. Their roots are basically buttress. And also they provide hardwood. They provide hardwood. and we said they form a canopy. So a canopy is that umbrella-like structure, which is a composition of the branches and leaves of a tree. So you're saying they form a canopy, more especially those ones that grow very tall. They tend to form a canopy. So dear candidates who are viewing this program, Somera muddiirolyo, try to think whether you have ever seen an equatorial forest. You can even write some of them. Those examples of equatorial forests that you have ever seen. And even basically where you have seen them. As well, you'll get your atlas, draw a map of Africa, and show the location of equatorial forests on the map. Then the next one, we shall look at the examples of trees that grow in equatorial forests. We said these are basically hardwood trees. The hardwood trees will include mahogany, muvule, rosewood, teak. If you'll get a chance to visit those areas there, your parent can always help you to understand most of those trees there. They may even help you to understand them in your local language or the language you speak commonly at home. We said we shall discuss these vegetation zones one by one until we shall finish them. So that is equatorial, or we can refer to it as tropical rainforests. Then the next one, we said we have savanna. Savanna vegetation. Still, like we located it on the map of Africa, like we located it on the map of Uganda, we shall also locate it on the map of Africa. We said this one is equatorial, which covers most parts of Central Africa and the western coast of Africa. As you move away from the equatorial region, where a lot of rainfall is received, as you move towards the tropics, the amount of rainfall reduces. And as the amount of rainfall reduces, it can't support the growth of these thick forests, the equatorial forests. Now it supports the growth of grasslands, depending on the amount of rainfall received in that particular area. So as you move away from the equatorial belt and you move towards the tropics, the climate changes and the type of vegetation also changes. And then you'll find this area with the savanna vegetation. And savanna vegetation covers the largest part of Africa. Like we said, it covers the largest part of Uganda. And in P6 we said it covers the largest part of East Africa. So in P7 we are saying it covers the largest part of Africa. However, Equatorial covers the largest part of Central Africa. But Savanna covers the largest part of Africa, East Africa, Uganda, and Africa. This one is basically divided into two. We have savanna grasslands and we have savanna woodlands. Those are the two types of savanna. The savanna woodland is what we call the wooded savanna. That's now dry savanna. And savanna grasslands, that's now the grassland savanna. Characteristics of savanna grasslands. Characteristics of savanna grasslands. We looked at this in P5. We said one, it has open grasslands with scattered trees. So when you go in an area with savanna, you'll see just an open grassland, but the trees are scattered. If this is an area of savanna, you'll see a lot of grass, just a grassland, but one tree here, you first see another tree the other side, so they are scattered, but everywhere there are grasslands. So that is savanna. When you go to western parts of Uganda, more especially the area of the Rift Valley, you'll see a very good example of savanna grasslands, more especially that area where the game park, where Queen Elizabeth National Game Park is located. It will give you a very good example of savanna grasslands. The trees which are there shed their leaves. Trees shed their leaves. Trees shed their leaves. During the dry season. Trees shed their leaves during the dry season. This is basically to reduce the rate of transpiration, because during the dry season, trees lose a lot of water through transpiration. So to reduce the rate of transpiration, they shed off their leaves. The leaves will fall off such that the rate of transpiration will reduce and the plant will be able to survive until the wet season. So when the wet season begins, the leaves now will regenerate. And such trees that shed their leaves during the dry season, we call them deciduous trees. So deciduous trees are the trees that shed their leaves in the dry season. And why do they shed their leaves in the dry season? It is to reduce the rate of transpiration. How are deciduous trees able to survive in the dry season? By shedding their leaves. The reason they shed their leaves is to reduce the rate of transpiration. Then also, this is savanna grasslands. When it comes to the dry season, the grass withers and it dries. That's why you see when you go in those areas with the savanna grasslands, wild bush fires are so common in the dry season because the grass withers and it dries up. It wilts and it dries up. You find the grass dry, it turns brown and it dries up. So sometimes when smokers pass around, they dump their cigarettes there. And some people also who are not conscious of the environment, they also just come and set them on fire. So wildfires are so common in areas of savanna grasslands during the dry season because the grass normally withers and it dries up in the dry season. Then we look at characteristics of savanna woodlands. Here, savanna woodlands, 1, trees have thorny leaves. And also this one introduces the rate of transpiration. So dear candidates who are watching this program, Somera muddiirolyo, tugambye enswa bw'ekyusa amaaso nga naawe envubu okyusa. Mu classroom tuvuddeyo, tuzze tusomera muddiiro lyaffe. So keep watching and keep tuning to BBS Telefina. Telefina eyaffe.
Master Cyrus ava mu Gwanya Preparatory School Kabojja abadde asomesa SST era nga nkakasa nti gwe omuyizi abadde mu class osobodde okuyiga bulungi enteekateeka eyo naddala vegetation gy'asomeseza olunaku olwaleero. Ebisigaddeyo ajja twongerezaako era ng'akomewo nate okwongera okutuwa essomo lye erya SST nkakasa nti gwe omuzadde ayagaliza abaana bo wakubidde